This week's Linux news, GTK X11 backend is officially deprecated. A new kernel tool improves Rust support, and Fedora's asahi remix moves Apple Silicon support forward with the Asahi team. Meanwhile, somewhere in the Linux world, the X11 holdouts are having a meltdown. But don't worry, that doesn't mean that X11 is disappearing overnight. Maybe tomorrow. Our first story comes from the GTK development team, who have now officially deprecated the X11 backend in GTK as of GTK4, meaning that going forward, and actually, if you read the announcement, it does say that they are actually pulling the code out of GTK5. So the X11 backend going forward will no longer be there. That means that, the deprecation is one thing. That just means that you should be moving your focus over to Wayland. And if you're dependent on GTK5, that is, or GTK4. The existing X11 apps will continue to work as long as they rely on GTK4 or older versions. But let's be honest, if you're still using GTK2 apps in 2025, also Linux 6.14 is introducing a new tool called GenDwarf KSIMs. That's a tool designed to improve Rust integration into the kernel. If that sounds complicated, just know it just helps Rust work better on Linux. And no, it's not the survival game, although that would be interesting. Now let's move on to security updates before your system gets hacked mid-video. The first piece of news is from Apex Legends. They are dropping Linux and Stream Deck support. Both EA and Respawn have officially removed support for Linux and Steam Deck, citing concerns over cheating. In other words, instead of fixing their anti-cheat system, they just decide to kick all the Linux users out. That's like banning all customers from a store because one guy shoplifted a candy bar. The fallout from this has been swift. Linux gamers are now reevaluating their life choices, and some of them are migrating en masse to 1990s Nintendo Game Boys. At least with one Game Boy, you don't have to worry about easy anti-cheat kicking you out of your own game. And you can buy 10 Game Boys for the price of an RTX 5090. And be honest, cloud gaming isn't that much of a solution either. I mean, who needs an RTX 5090 when your latency makes you feel like you're playing on a Game Boy? There was a major ATM vulnerability that was exposed at DEF CON. Security researchers have discovered not one, but 6 critical flaws in Diebold's Nixdorf's ATM software, potentially allowing attackers to just drain the cash machines. So imagine if you're walking up to an ATM and you press a few buttons, and instead of getting the cash that you asked for, it just starts spitting out cash like you hit the jackpot. Also, AMD has a new vulnerability called Sync Close that was exposed recently. Researchers found that the flaw in AMD processors goes all the way back to 2006. Allowing deep memory access via system management mode, or SMM. So if you're still rocking a Phenom 2 chip back in the day, well, maybe it's finally time to upgrade, because I don't think there's going to be any firmware updates for you. Meanwhile, over at Intel, they're celebrating. So let's move on to the biggest financial disaster of the week. On January the 27th, Nvidia lost nearly $600 billion in market cap. The largest one-day loss in U.S. stock market histories. The investors who just last week were buying up Nvidia stock at record highs are now calling their financial advisors and saying, so what about your retirement plan? Yeah, the problem was that DeepSeek, a Chinese AI startup, developed a rival model. It's an AI software system that generates large language models, and not only a fraction of the cost, but also allegedly the fraction of computing power. The U.S. regulators are investigating whether DeepSeek obtained NVIDIA chips through third-party sellers. In a completely unrelated story, A mysterious Nvidia employee that's dressed in a black leather jacket was spotted inserting a USB stick into every ATM within 5 miles of his kitchen. When your stock tanks $600 billion overnight, you got to find liquidity wherever you can. The local reports state that this mysterious figure was later seen using the money to buy up every used Game Boy in a 50-mile radius. In other news, the upcoming RTX 5090 is rumored now. Originally when it came out day one, the scalpers were asking $5,000 for it. Now they're asking $10,000 on some markets for a RTX 5090. Fedora and Asahi have teamed up to create a new product called the Fedora Remix. This includes KDE Plasma 6.2, and it also is 100% Wayland. It also supports OpenGL, OpenGLES, OpenCL, and Vulkan out of the box. It has support for audio across the Apple line, supports everywhere from the Apple Air all the way up to the iMac, and soon, I guess, the Mac Pro. I did notice a while back that they are working on the M3 actively, so that may be dropping pretty soon. They're also actively working on a number of things that are marked here in pink. So, they did have a partnership between the Fedora development team and Asahi, and it looks like it's now been formalized to create a real distribution. But hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.